In the shadow of a mighty volcano, on the southern Italian coast, lies the greatest archaeological time capsule ever discovered. Pompeii. The incredible Roman metropolis where an entire city and even its people have been frozen in time. These were the streets where they lived. These were the houses of their friends, their families, their neighbours. These are the bars and cafes where they ate and drank. In this programme, I'm going on an incredible adventure, revealing how Pompeii was discovered, bit by bit, over 300 years. Look at this. Wow. And uncovering amazing details about the way Romans lived, how they worked, and how they relaxed. I'll explore the city's grandest buildings. I just can't get over these colours. Discover some of its darkest secrets.
It's estimated that as many as 10 people could have been tied to this.
And investigate the surprising story of how Pompeii found itself caught up in the Second World War.
If you drop enough bombs in that area, there's a good chance that you'll hit something.
Pompeii is without doubt one of the greatest archaeological sites in the world. Pompeii, unique in its size and level of amazing preservation. No other discovery has told us more about the way the ancient Romans lived and died. And the story of what was discovered here is one of the most astonishing ever told. This is magical. I've been to Roman sites before where you get very excited about a fragment of one building. But this is an entire city, frozen in time. Here I am in the Forum, which would have been the bustling civic and religious heart of this settlement. And there's roads leading off, buildings stretching as far as I can see. This is nothing less than the world's greatest time capsule. But until 3 centuries ago, this remarkable city was almost totally invisible. It had been buried deep beneath the ground for over 1,500 years after a cataclysmic event. In the autumn of AD 79, in the middle of a normal day, a volcano, Mount Vesuvius, erupted. And I'm off to take a look at it. I've never been up close before like this. It's unbelievably impressive, so awe-inspiring. Dominates the entire region. Today, thankfully, the volcano is quiet. What an epic view. The Bay of Naples out there. And down here, 6 miles or so away, difficult to see in this haze, but surrounded by the modern metropolis, you've got ancient Pompeii. Seems like quite a distance. 2,000 years ago, this volcano was far too close for comfort. The effects of the eruption was catastrophic. Over 100 miles of coastline were totally covered, devastating populations, towns and villages, and burying Pompeii in up to 6 meters of debris. The city was abandoned, but it was never truly forgotten. The legend of Pompeii's opulent baths, the advanced construction of its villas, and straight Roman roads survived. But no one truly believed that the city's buildings and bodies actually lay perfectly preserved just beneath their feet. But that was about to change. I've come to the modern-day town of Herculano, just the other side of Vesuvius, to pick up the story. It all began with an accidental discovery made here 300 years ago. Back then, all this was farmland, a far cry from the bustling street of a busy Italian town like it is now. A farmer right here discovered that his well had run dry. He decided to extend it, drill it deeper into the earth. So he used a big auger, like a big drill bit. He attached an ox, which then walked round and round, boring, hot work that had to be done. As he was watching, he noticed that the spoil coming out of the earth started to have a different quality. Chunks of what looked like marble were being dug out. Shaped, worked marble. The farmer had no particular interest in the marble, other than how much it might be worth. He sold it to a local prince, who was so intrigued that he decided to investigate further. So he sent his men to dig at the well. What they unearthed is still hidden deep beneath the modern buildings of Herculano. And I'm getting special access to see it with local archaeologist Dr. Mario Grimaldi. The prince's men tunnelled deep into the ground, cutting through solid rock, armed only with pickaxes. The conditions were dark and dangerous. Areas of rock were often filled with poisonous gas. But as they tunnelled deeper, it became clear that there weren't just fragments of marble buried down here. There was something much, much more substantial. Wow, this is crazy. So here's some structure here. Then, after weeks of arduous digging, they discovered something beyond their wildest dreams. Whoa! Their tunnels had opened out into a vast chamber.
Now we are on the past.
It must have felt incredible. Look at this! Wow! So what are we looking at here?
We are on the theater.
A theatre?
Yeah, of the theater. It's a very, very beautiful area.
So we are in a Roman theatre 20 metres underground.
Yes, 20 meters, 25 meters under the ground.
So the audience was sat here and there's some stairs there. Mario even has a map of the original excavations, revealing a warren of tunnels dug by those early explorers.
Now we are here. We have different tunnels to understand the different point of the architecture of the theater.
Today, you think of excavation as you scoop everything out and it's open to the air.
Yes.
But this is just burrowed like moles underground, just tunnelling along, just looking for things and leaving these little tunnels in the earth. Yes. So we're here in the seating area.
Yes.
Down there, so there's a stage down there. And everything in dark has never been excavated.
Yes, yes.
If we excavate through this volcanic debris here, we would find...
Continue the steps, yes.
Then, as the diggers continued to cut through the tough volcanic rock, they discovered a key piece of evidence, telling them exactly where they were. Information that told them this was a theatre belonging to the town of Herculaneum. So Herculaneum, the city famously lost in the same eruption as Pompeii.
Yes.
It's so weird to emerge from those dark Roman depths out into the light and energy of a modern Italian town. It's so exciting that they can exist so close to each other. This, for the first time, was really hard evidence that the Roman landscape might not have been destroyed, completely obliterated by the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD. There might just be whole towns and cities down there, buried beneath the earth. Perhaps the myth was true, and there were treasures waiting to be discovered. News of the astonishing underground discoveries spread like wildfire. Now, in 1748, a new search was ordered, this time by the King of Naples. It was in a different, easier to access location, an area of farmland shrouded in mystery. Locals called it La Civita, the settlement, but we would come to know it by a very different name. One morning, in early spring, men began digging. For the next few weeks, the team removed tons of volcanic debris. Then they spotted something. As they dug deeper, they found they weren't just churning through the same old volcanic material. They found different kinds of stone, stuff with structure like this, edges, tool marks. As they continued exploring, they found another edge, then another. They appeared to be seats, row upon row of them. It began to look like they may have unearthed an immense building. And then, after weeks of digging, as the building gradually took shape, the true identity of their discovery was revealed. And it was magnificent. The most spectacular, virtually intact Roman amphitheatre. This is one of the best Roman sites I have ever been to. Although no one knew it yet, the first building belonging to the ancient city of Pompeii had just been revealed. You'd think the king and his team would be ecstatic. But no, they were interested in statues, in artwork, in golden treasures. And with the exception of one or two paintings, there was none of that here. In fact, there's a diary entry for the 27th of April, 1748. Nothing was found and only ruined structures uncovered. If it wasn't treasure, they weren't interested. I guess if you remember, they were not archaeologists. They were treasure seekers. And with nothing to loot, Pompeii's archaeological rediscovery was brought to a halt. Then, after 7 long years, everything changed. 100 meters from the amphitheatre, local farmers unearthed something intriguing. Edges of these expensive, grand marble columns were spotted, poking out of the soil. A decision was made. Digging would begin again, now led by Swiss engineer Karl Weber. Just like I am now, Weber made his way to the place they'd been discovered. The tension must have been unbearable. There was a lot at stake. If he failed to find anything, it would be a major blow to the campaign to rediscover Pompeii. Over the following days, tons of volcanic ash was shifted, in the desperate hope of making a find. Then, they spotted something. It became clear the columns were part of a larger structure. They continued on, carefully. Then they revealed walls decorated in beautiful plasterwork. Until finally, something incredible appeared. The beautiful, preserved home of a wealthy, ancient Roman. Even though it's been well over 200 years since this villa was found, you can still just imagine how exciting it must have been walking through this opulent Roman house. As more and more was exposed, Weber's excitement grew. And this moment of magic as he slowly excavated, clearing away these unbelievable wall paintings, vivid colours that you would not be able to see anywhere else in the world. The interior decoration of a Roman house from 1700 years before. For the first time in centuries, you could walk around an almost intact, luxurious Roman home. Archaeologist Dr. Sophie Hay can tell me more. I just can't get over these colours.
I know, isn't it amazing? The sky blue is like being sort of outside, but yet we're inside. It's sort of windows straight into the Roman world.
What had been unearthed was one of the largest private homes in Pompeii, taking up 2 whole street blocks, with its own sumptuous garden complete with a long ornamental pool. It even had its own private baths. But who could possibly live in a house like this? Amazingly, they found a name.
Well, we've got archaeological gold dust for this place. So here we have an image of a huge painted inscription that was on the facade of this building, and it clearly says this estate is owned by Julia Felix.
That's the smoking gun.
It is. And then underneath she's got an advert for her bath complex, which she wants to rent out. She calls it an elegant bath and only for respectable people. So I like it. She doesn't want the riffraff coming here.
So although she's super rich, obviously, because she's living in a place like this, she has to make a bit of money.
Yeah, she needs an income to survive. So she's not an elite member of society. But she really is kind of a sort of savvy entrepreneur.
The unearthing of Julia Felix's home was phenomenal, and it meant excavations would now be able to continue in the area. Yet, astonishingly, no one knew where they were actually digging. Nothing had told them this house belonged to the lost city of Pompeii. But a few years later, after tireless searching, a new critical piece of evidence would emerge. So this is it. This is the missing link that allowed archaeologists to decode and understand the place they were working. It's an engraving, an inscription carved into a stone. It deals with fairly mundane public business, government instructions and things. But down here, there's a phrase, Re Publicae Pompeianorum, refers to the people of Pompeii. They finally realised where they were digging. It was the city of Pompeii. It was back on the map, and it would change things forever. Now people knew. This was the lost city of Pompeii. The previous discoveries, the amphitheatre, Julia Felix's home, were part of the once hidden Roman city. Then, in 1764, there was another breakthrough. A key public building was found, the massive Temple of Isis. Pompeii's reputation was spreading far and wide. "250 years ago, the atmosphere in the Bay of Naples was buzzing. The incredible discovery of Pompeii had turned the area into an archaeological theme park, and it was becoming the holiday destination for Europe's rich and famous. This was the view that those early tourists would have got as they eagerly approached. Got the Bay of Naples, dominated by Mount Vesuvius. Pompeii, just a couple of miles inland over there. Ancient history had been made fashionable by Pompeii. Anyone who was anyone wants to be here. Tourism and digging start to feed off each other. The more amazing discoveries were made, the more grand tourists showed up here, bringing with them the funding to do yet more digging. To keep the tourists interested and the money flowing into the site, it became essential that new and incredible discoveries were made. In the hope of unearthing more of Pompeii's buried secrets, digging began in the south of the site. The new dig was led by Spaniard Francesco La Vega. To begin with, disappointingly, investigations revealed very little, only an open space among the spoil. But the work continued. Then, after weeks of digging, something was revealed. La Vega's men dug down into the volcanic debris, removing tons of the stuff, until they came upon a strange kind of structure. They made a note in the dig diary. Continue to clear the earth in the building which lies adjacent to the town walls, which reveals a large courtyard or piazza surrounded by a portico with columns painted red and rooms on 2 floors. It wasn't at all clear what it was, so they started investigating the little rooms which seemed to surround the square on all sides. As more material was cleared, more mysterious rooms were unearthed. It clearly wasn't a normal house. It didn't feel like someone's home. I can really imagine La Vega's curiosity as he cleared out these little rooms and explored them. He must have wondered what on earth they were. They weren't luxurious accommodation. They were small, cramped. They felt like cells. Then, as the digging team slowly emptied the cells of rubble, they made an incredible discovery. It was in the corner of one of these buildings that they found some objects that finally solved the mystery and told them exactly what this building was. What they had found was a huge gladiatorial barracks. For the first time ever, evidence had been uncovered of where Roman gladiators had once lived and trained. And it was groundbreaking. Many of those greatest finds are now in downtown Naples, at the city's Grand Archaeological Museum. And Professor Valerie Higgins has agreed to show them to me. These are absolutely amazing.
Yep, this is the best collection of gladiator helmets in existence.
Do you think they were actually wearing this when they went out to fight in the arena?
Yes, you would put into fight into the arena someone who was totally covered head to foot in armour with sort of massive weapons. And then pitted against him would be another guy, maybe, who we call the retiarius, who would be practically naked, except for a net and a trident. And so this guy has got all the protection, but he can't really move very fast and he can't see very well. The retiarius can, like, dodge in and out and can be quick and try and get it.
For thousands of years, Rome's gladiatorial games had been the stuff of legend. Now, the discovery of the gladiators' barracks in Pompeii gave us the first unique insight into this terrifying sport. 2,000 years after they were last used, we could touch the armour they wore as they entered the arena and see firsthand the gruesome weapons they once held. Gladiators like Pompeii's Marcus Satilius wielded swords like these to slay both man and beast. At the end of the 18th century, after the incredible excavation of the gladiator barracks, more and more of Pompeii began to be revealed. Dozens more homes and the breathtaking theatre were unearthed. But this spectacular holiday period was about to come to a sudden end. In 1806, the armies of Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte marched on Naples, and Pompeii soon fell into his hands. When Napoleon invaded Italy, he was a man on a mission. He believed that his empire was the heir to the Roman Empire. He even said of himself, "I am a true Roman emperor. I am of the best race of Caesars." He wanted to gather together all the treasures of ancient Rome to boost his power and prestige. Napoleon's diggers entered the ancient site. Soon, countless works of art were being stripped out and shipped back to Paris. But he wanted to find much, much more. And to help him do this, he turned to someone he could really trust. His little sister, Caroline. Later that year, she arrived at Pompeii on a mission to excavate the entire city. So I've just come out through the gate, and it should be just here. There it is, look at these massive, great big stone blocks. The building blocks of the outer wall of Pompeii. Originally, defensive fortification. And this was the big idea, which is you establish the size of Pompeii, the sort of scale of the archaeological project, by working out first what the perimeter is. It's a huge engineering project. With the grand plan laid out in front of them, the diggers began the back-breaking task of removing thousands of tons of volcanic material. Collapsing debris was a serious risk, but they exposed walls that carried on going. As the months passed, the city's outline slowly began to take shape, until they revealed something not seen in centuries. What they found was stunning. They realised that the existing areas that had been dug out here and here were just a tiny proportion of a big city. The walls stretched 2 miles around it. The area inside, 163 acres. This was the first time in 2,000 years anyone had really had a sense of the size and shape of Pompeii. Revealing the city's walls was an incredible achievement. But just as this lost, ancient world was beginning to come to light, the dig received a crushing blow. Napoleon's armies were defeated throughout Europe. The Bonapartes were kicked out of Naples. Digging at Pompeii now slowed to a trickle. But in the middle of the 19th century, an event took place that would take Pompeii's rediscovery to another level. Italy became a unified country. Discovering more of Pompeii became a mission for the new nation. And a new archaeologist was brought in to oversee it, Giuseppe Fiorelli. Fiorelli was perfect for the job. He wasn't going to pass up this opportunity. He'd worked here since he was a young man. He was obsessed with telling the real story of normal Pompeians, people who he saw as his ancestors. And that passion would lead to one of the most arresting discoveries in the history of Pompeii. From the very first excavations, Pompeii's archaeologists had been unearthing skeletons. The tragic legacy of the men, women, and children who hadn't managed to flee the deadly eruption of 79 AD. When the early archaeologists were excavating places like this, they would often find human remains, skeletons that had been obviously killed by falling walls or big chunks of volcanic rock. But sometimes the skeletons had another strange feature. There'd be a sort of pocket of air around them, like a void. And archaeologists didn't really understand why. In this recent example, the gap around the skeleton can clearly be seen. It was a complete mystery. Why hadn't it been filled in by the volcanic ash? To understand what that was, I'm joined by archaeologist Dr. Alison Emerson.
So here we're looking at a set of doors. Clearly, they're the doors that once stood here, but not quite the doors that once stood here because they are made out of plaster, not wood, plaster of Paris.
So the Romans would have had wooden doors here?
Exactly, these would have been wooden doors.
These wooden doors have now been recreated using plaster. During the eruption of 79 AD, ash from Vesuvius covered the wooden door and set hard. Over the centuries, the wood inside rotted away, leaving a gap or void inside the hard, compacted ash. But before they rotted, the doors imprinted themselves into the ash, leaving a clear outline of their shape. So the archaeologists would have seen this long, thin, very, very deep hole in the volcanic material and thought, that's going to be something interesting, let's pour plaster of Paris.
Exactly, they could use that like a mold by pouring plaster of Paris, and then suddenly they have the impression of that object.
Fiorelli decided to apply the same technique to the voids that were left around the bones of the victims of Pompeii after their flesh had rotted away. But to do this, he would need to discover the right set of remains. On a Tuesday morning in early 1863, Fiorelli discovered a skeleton with a void around it. He would later write, "I thought that by quickly pouring in plaster of Paris, the cast of an entire person would be obtained. What happened that day transformed Pompeii."
They're really evocative.
You're looking at human beings in the throes of death. Capturing these victims in this way was remarkable. Nowhere else on Earth have human remains been preserved like these at Pompeii. The pain and suffering shown as they suffocated in a cloud of hot ash. There's something so amazing about the face of this one, it's so striking. It's a face of trauma, of terror, of pain.
It's true. It's impossible not to read our understanding of what happened to him into this face and to see that human reaction there.
As a child there, becoming a dad has turned me into jelly. Every time I see a wounded or injured child, I just want to cry, and that's really upsetting, isn't it?
It is.
Do we know anything about these people?
We don't know much. We know that they were fleeing the eruption after it had already been going for about a day. So they are people who decided to try and wait it out, and who then decided to run for it at a moment when it seemed like it was about to end. Unfortunately, the most dangerous part of the eruption was about to begin. They all took refuge together in the garden where we are sitting. And here they all died together, but we can't say who they were or how they were connected, or even if they were connected prior to the events of the day of the eruption.
And yet they're connected for the rest of eternity by being here in this unique collection. The casts were a turning point in Pompeii's history. It was no longer just a unique window into the lives of ancient Romans. It was now somewhere you could witness the actual moments of their death. At the start of the 20th century, Pompeii had entered a golden age of discovery. nearly half of the once lost Roman city had been unearthed. And the diggers were beginning to focus their efforts in a previously unexplored area. I'm heading to where that was. At this time, Pompeii was a tale of two cities. This area had been extensively dug out, the Forum, the Temple of Isis, the grand buildings. And over the other side of the city, the amphitheatre had also been excavated. But in between them was basically a gigantic pile of volcanic debris. No one really knew what lay underneath it, but they were about to find out. Over the following weeks, the digging team slowly excavated the area. Gradually, they began to expose something fascinating. At first, they weren't really entirely sure what they were uncovering. But then they started to realise it was a road. A road that seemed to stretch out endlessly in front of them. Day after day, they pressed on, exposing paving stone after paving stone on this road, building after building, side street after side street. Tons and tons of volcanic debris removed, and still they kept on going. Until finally, they revealed something spectacular. A 900-metre-long road that would tell them more than anyone had ever known about the way the Romans lived and relaxed. It was lined with 64 shops, including bakeries, tanners, metalworks and lamp makers. For me, I think this is the place where I feel closest to getting a handle on the character of the city, the place where people would come to eat, drink, buy, sell, and play. This was the Oxford Street of Pompeii. Fittingly, archaeologists called it the Via dell'Abbondanza, the Avenue of Abundance. But just as these discoveries were being made, events outside Pompeii would bring all of it to a halt. In the northwest of the city is the House of the Faun, one of the largest and most expensive homes found in Pompeii. Once owned by an upper-class Roman, it was built to the highest of standards, with an interior measuring 32,000 square feet. But tucked away in the corner of one of its many rooms is a strange, rusting relic. A relic ignored by most tourists. Here it is. This is a bit of a mystery. You do not expect to find this kind of thing in an ancient Roman ruin. This is a Second World War bomb. That's the nose there, and it's gone off. It's detonated. You can see the way the casing here has been twisted and fragmented. The real question then is, what was a Second World War bomb doing here in Pompeii? 100 years ago, Italy had a new leader, the fascist Benito Mussolini. He planned for new excavations to show Pompeii off to the world, linking his rule with the glories of ancient Rome. Excavations were drastically scaled up. A huge gymnasium was unearthed where residents could swim in the giant pool, box and wrestle, or just exercise with friends. But disaster was just around the corner. Nearly a year after the Second World War began, Italy joined, allied with German forces. Digging at Pompeii came to a stop. 3 years later, the Allies were on the verge of invading the Italian mainland. Thousands of British and American troops were just about to land on the beaches of Salerno, 35 kilometres south of Pompeii, in an attempt to defeat the Italians and kick the Germans out of the country. The ancient Roman city would soon be on the front line. I've come to the top of Vesuvius to get an overview. In the summer of 1943, this coastal plain below Vesuvius was buzzing with military activity. The Germans and Italians were flooding along here, determined to stave off Allied advances in the south of Italy. Allied commanders were desperate to stop them. And so the Allies decided to attack the area from the sky. At 7 p.m. on the 24th of August, British and Canadian bombers stationed in Libya took off. By 10 p.m. that night, they could see Vesuvius looming above this landscape. Conditions were said to be hazy, but good. There was no moon. There were some pinpricks of light where searchlights were trying to pick out the bombers. There was anti-aircraft fire and enemy interceptors. One of the bombers was shot down. But despite this opposition, they began their bomb run. Over the next few minutes, hundreds of bombs were dropped from Allied aircraft. Pompeii lay beneath them. The devastation was catastrophic. In an area closed off to the public, there's still plenty of evidence of that destruction. I'm getting special access to it. This is a tragic corner of Pompeii. I'm surrounded by shelves on which there are thousands of shards of Roman architectural features, frescoes, bits of stucco, painting. They survived Vesuvius, only to be shattered by the bombs of the 20th century. When Allied soldiers arrived in Pompeii, they recorded over 100 damaged buildings. Countless works of art had been obliterated. This footage shows a bomb crater in the ancient amphitheatre. But just why was it bombed? Almost immediately, different theories started to emerge as to why Allied bombs had dropped on Pompeii. Some said it was deliberate. The British believed that there were German troops in the archaeological site. A BBC report referred to the Germans using the amphitheatre as a gun position. Others said it was just a tragic accident. The British and Allies had been aiming their bombs at German troops nearby, and they'd fallen on Pompeii. But there are clues to exactly what happened in these wartime squadron records and aerial photographs. And I've come to meet Professor Nigel Pollard to find out more.
There are loads and loads of accounts of the bombing missions that were conducted on the nights that Pompeii was damaged and the days that Pompeii were damaged. Here in the National Archive, the RAF accounts, the US accounts as well, they all essentially tell the same story. They tell us what those targets are. They're not the archaeological site of Pompeii. The night of the 24th to the 25th of August, what they were aiming at were, the railway comes through here, that was one of their targets. The other one of their targets on that night was the steelworks at Torre Annunziata there. This is about a mile, 2 kilometres or so from the archaeological site of Pompeii. When the Germans were counter-attacking, they were bringing their supplies and reinforcements down these roads. You've got all these different routes coming together with bridges and overpasses, railway, roads and so on. This is what one of my military friends calls a high payoff target.
In this picture, you can see bombs being dropped from one of the aircraft.
Even if your bombing's not very accurate, if you drop enough bombs in that area, then there's a good chance that you'll hit something, as they did. But unfortunately, sometimes the something is the archaeological site as well.
And the tragedy is that archaeological site is just metres away. Despite the extensive damage, Pompeii survived. Once the war was over, its story of rediscovery would start again. And today, decades later, this amazing city is still revealing magnificent secrets about the ancient Roman way of life. I've come back to the site, and there's a very special area I want to explore. This is the north area of Pompeii, where back in the day, different social classes lived cheek by jowl, rich, middle class and poor. And back in 2018, the decision was made to do a bit of a limited excavation to push some of this volcanic debris back from some threatened buildings. And they were about to make a major discovery. Dr. Sophie Hay has agreed to show me around this exciting new find that reveals ordinary life in Pompeii. Where are we now?
We're at a bar in Pompeii, which would have opened up onto the street, and there are about 100 of these around Pompeii. But actually this one is completely unique, thanks to these amazing frescoes on it. Really, really beautiful depictions. Pretty much a menu, to be honest. There's 2 dead ducks, probably waiting to be cooked, and a rooster. And then looking at them is probably the owner's dog, who's sort of tied up and a bit straining at the leash.
Oh, so you can't order a dog burger?
I'd hope not.
Unearthing this food bar was a major breakthrough. It has allowed archaeologists to delve into the lives of ordinary residents, learning how they lived and ate. Because poor Roman families couldn't afford kitchens in their homes, it was places like this where they would get their meals. And there was amazing evidence of what they were eating.
There are these sunken terracotta jars called dolia, and inside them they found food remains, which is unheard of across the rest of Pompeii.
So it'd been like a buffet?
Exactly, you get to choose which dish you like, and one of the dishes sounds particularly lovely. It was a mixture, a stew, let's say, of fish and land snails. So your first sort of surf and turf dish, if you like.
But this bar also reveals the tragedy of Pompeii. Inside, archaeologists discovered the bones of 2 people killed in the eruption, showing how this ancient wonder remains an incredible window into both life and death in the Roman world. They're just the latest finds in an incredible archaeological story, one that has been written for over 300 years. Pompeii is an archaeological wonder like no other. And for me, the stories of the discoveries are as exciting as the discoveries themselves. Pompeii has told us more about the way ancient Romans lived than anywhere else on Earth. It has also shown us how very similar and very different they were to us. From their places of worship to their roads, from how they decorated their homes to how they spent their leisure time. And best of all, this story is far from over. With 1/3 of this city yet to be excavated, who knows what treasures and tales are still buried here.